Folks, today's video is made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community with more than 30,000 courses. 2 months for free for you guys if you just go through the link below, and let's get into it. An Ig Nobel Prize is to science what a Darwin Award is to survival. These Ig Nobel rewards are not necessarily mean-spirited research Razzies, as they usually aim to make people both laugh and think. In fact, one Ig Nobel winner has even gone on to win an actual Nobel Prize. That being said, the Ig Nobels tend to gravitate toward the laughable, to the point where the Ig Nobel mascot is a fallen-down parody of the Thinker statue called the Stinker. In a sea of absurd Ig Nobel winners, though, the following 10 are some of the most ridiculous. Number 10. The SnotBot lives up to its name. Some scientists get to devote their professional lives to finding a cure for cancer. Others are tasked with combing the oceans to find whale snot. Karina Acevedo-Whitehouse, Agnes Rocha-Gosselin, and Diane Gendron belong to the latter category, but they were set to approach their task with every bit of ingenuity and enthusiasm that they could muster. This is how they built the SnotBot, a specialized drone for collecting nasal mucus from large marine mammals, and shockingly enough, they won the 2010 Ig Nobel Prize for Engineering. SnotBot drones are meant to hover above surfacing whales and collect samples from the blowspouts as they exhale air from their lungs. On paper, this is a magnificent feat of engineering and a handy way to collect information from whales for conservation and research purposes without disturbing the animals. In practice, though, it's a robot copter for collecting boogers. This, to be fair, probably makes these three scientists the coolest people in the world, at least within the prestigious 4-year-old demographic. Number 9. The Nigerian Prince fictional universe. You've almost certainly read some of the works of the winners of the 2005 Ig Nobel for Literature. The award was given to the proud online entrepreneurs of the country of Nigeria for creating an innovative series of short stories that have been read by millions of people the world over. These beloved tales feature a colorful cast of wealthy characters such as Barrister John A. Mbeki Esquire and Mrs. Mariam Sani Abacha. Their life stories and situations often vary, but the thread that connects all of these stories is the unfortunate fact that they are currently unable to access their great wealth. It is up to you, dear reader, to provide them with a small amount of money which they are more than happy to pay back to you 1,000 times over, if not more, as soon as these grateful millionaires get their rightful funds back. Yes, they gave an Ig Nobel Prize to the Nigerian Prince scam. Yes, it's that kind of award. Number 8. The study? In 2015, the Ig Nobel Literature Prize went to Mark Dingamanse, Francisco Torreira, and Nick J. Enfield, whose groundbreaking research is a universal word, conversational infrastructure, and the convergent evolution of linguistic terms, set to find out how many languages feature the titular word. The researchers actually discovered that every language seems to have a version of which is fairly interesting, or rather, it would be if it wasn't for the fact that the researchers weren't quite sure why this was. If only there was some kind of short universal word that they could use to express their bewilderment here. The authors of the study seem to have taken their Ig Nobel Prize in their stride, since it is the first thing they mention on the study's website, and in fact they use their Ig Nobel notoriety to plug their vastly longer follow-up study on universal communication problem repair. Number 7. Ratty language skills. In 2005, 3 researchers from the University of Barcelona authored Effects of Backward Speech and Speaker Variability in Language Discrimination by Rats. This revealed to the world that rats are unable to distinguish between people speaking Dutch backwards and people speaking Japanese backwards. Their efforts earned them the 2007 Ig Nobel for Linguistics, which the winners gracefully accepted via a recorded speech. No word from whether it was delivered backwards, though. Ironically enough, the award itself seems to play a lot on language, and particularly how ridiculous the study's premise sounds. As New Scientist points out, the researchers also discovered that rats are generally able to distinguish between the two languages when they're spoken normally, and tend to prefer the one they've heard the most of. This is a neat discovery for scientists who try to track down the origins of human language recognition patterns, though also a crushing blow for rat trainers who might have been hoping for bilingual pets. Number 6. The dietary benefits of cannibalism. In 2018, the Ig Nobel of Nutrition went to dedicated researcher James Cole, who reaped his reward thanks to his painstaking calculations about the caloric intake of meat diets. However, we wouldn't bet on him becoming the next diet guru, seeing as his study was called Assessing the Caloric Significance of Episodes of Human Cannibalism in the Paleolithic. Yes, Cole took a look at the nutritional values of cannibalism, and lo and behold, he discovered that the caloric intake of a humanitarian diet is much lower than those provided by many of the more traditional meat-based diets. Let's just hope that no one has the bright idea to include this discovery in their spin on the paleo diet. Alright, so maybe this video's got you thinking, I sure would like to win an Ig Nobel Prize, that would be cool. Well, the good news is you can massively increase your chances of getting one if you develop some skills through Skillshare, today's sponsor. Although, stay away from the cannibalism, guys, shall we? And I just want to tell you about them before we hit the top 5. Now, I've talked about Skillshare before on this channel. I'm sure many of you already have it, but maybe you haven't and you're miles away from that Ig Nobel Prize because you're just completely skillless. Well, that's a great shame because on Skillshare are 30,000 classes for you to level up your design, business, video, social, whatever skills, you can find it on Skillshare. I've taken video production courses, I've taken courses on engineering viral videos, which I was very skeptical about, but it was really legit. Lately I've been into productivity. There was a course on there by a guy called Thomas Frank, also a YouTuber, getting more stuff done in a day. I love that kind of stuff. It's great for me. Whether you're productive or unproductive, I think that productivity stuff could always benefit you. But yeah, Skillshare, just go do it. You'll like it. There's also 2 months for free, so support TopTenz by supporting Skillshare. It's a good thing to do. There is a link below, 2-month free trial, and let's get into those top 5. Number 5. Scientifically wrinkled sheets. Isn't it annoying when the sheets on your bed become wrinkled? Say, have you ever wondered about the exact process that makes it happen? No, you've just been assuming that your own tossing and turning causes it, like everyone else? Well, clearly then, you're not El Mahavadan of Harvard University or Enrique C. de Villablanca from Universidad de Santiago in Chile. These 2 researchers have studied the exact process of how sheets become wrinkled in their 2002 to 2003 papers, Wrinkling of an Elastic Sheet Under Tension and Geometry and Physics of Wrinkling. Their goal was to study the mechanical characterization of thin solid films, which is a fancy way of saying we study how sheets wrinkle. Their variant studies were rewarded with the 2007 Ig Nobel Prize for Physics, which Mahavadan gracefully accepted in person. Villablanca couldn't attend the ceremony, so he sent his sister. We imagine the words, "You want me to do what?" were uttered more than once during that discussion between the siblings. Number 4. A research material of lies. In 2016, the recipients of the Ig Nobel Prize for Psychology set themselves up for a failure, or at least a hefty helping, of existential crisis right from the start. The multinational team behind From Junior to Senior Pinocchio, a cross-sectional lifespan investigation of deception, studied the concept of lying by interviewing over 1,000 people aged 6 to 77 about their lying habits and frequency, and observed their lying ability. Over the study, they discovered that adolescent people tend to tell the most lies, and small children and elderly people tell the least. However, there's a minor problem with interviewing a 4-digit number of liars and basing your results on their answers, and that hurdle is what made the team's efforts so Ig Nobel worthy. Really, the Ig Nobel Committee's reasoning behind the award puts it best. According to them, the award was given for asking 1,000 liars how often they lie and for deciding whether or not to believe those answers. Number 3. Do cows with names produce more milk than unnamed ones? In 2009, the Annals of Improbable Research, the organizers of the Ig Nobel Prize ceremony, debuted a brand new prize category, veterinary medicine. It's almost like they had a very specific winner in mind here, and that would be Catherine Douglas and Peter Rawlinson from Newcastle University in the UK. Their scientific study of 516 dairy farmers had a highly specific goal to find out whether cows with names produced more milk than unnamed bovines. To the delight of animal lovers everywhere, Bessie, Daisy, and Clarabelle indeed produced more milk than dairy cows 16 to 18, and by a fairly significant margin too. Over a dairy cow's annual 10-month lactation period, named cows gave over 68 gallons more than the unnamed cows. By now, you've probably gathered that many of the recipients of an Ig Nobel Prize are very good-natured about it, and they often turn up to accept their awards in person. However, few have been as game as Rawlinson and Douglas. While Rawlinson was able to attend the ceremony in person, Douglas had recently given birth and was unable to make the trip. To represent herself and her work, she sent a photo of herself, her baby, dressed in a cow costume, naturally, and a cow. Number 2. Condemning the use of needless long words with needless long words. The Ig Nobel Prize has some notoriety in scientific circles, if only as a well-loved inside joke. Every once in a while, it seems that researchers are deliberately trying to get themselves nominated for the prize, especially if their research field happens to be a little bit off the beaten path. A prime example of this "come on, surely this guy did it on purpose" category is the 2006 Literature Ig Nobel, which went to Daniel Oppenheimer of Princeton University. You also really have to tip your hat to the man too. In a particularly good Ig Nobel year that featured people researching why woodpeckers don't get headaches, proof that dung beetles are finicky eaters, rectal massage as a hiccup cure, and a serious scientific look at why the sound of fingernails on a chalkboard is annoying, Oppenheimer managed to stand out with a fairly reasonable report that basically stated that using complicated words too much seems a whole lot like the writer is overcompensating. What made his report a slam dunk for an Ig Nobel was not its content so much as its title: Consequences of Erudite Vernacular Utilized Irrespective of Necessity, Problems with Using Long Words Needlessly. While Oppenheimer may have practiced against what he preached as an academic joke, the report's title was clearly funny enough for the annals of improbable research to slap him with an Ig Nobel. And hey, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Number 1. Shooting art fans with lasers for science. Beauty and pain are pretty much the main fuels for art, and science just had to put its grubby mitts on the subject to try and see where the two intersect. As a result, a trio of Italian researchers put together a study known as Aesthetic Value of Paintings Affect Pain Thresholds. If that headline sounds like they forced subjects to look at art while poking them with needles, don't worry, that's not what happens. No self-respecting scientist would stab a bunch of art lovers with needles. Oh no, they would use lasers. The researchers studied the correlation between aesthetic pleasure and physical pain by making people look at both pretty and ugly paintings while shooting them in the hand with powerful laser beams. The experiment was a success in that they discovered that pretty pictures indeed produced lower pain scores than unpleasant ones. For their research, they received the 2014 Ig Nobel Prize for Art. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe. Also hit that notification bell so you find out when we actually put out a new video. That would be cool. And as always, I'll see you next time.